Okay, this is chapter 8 in the Understanding and Implementing the 16 Firefighter Life Safety Initiatives textbook in our Safety and Survival class. The title of the chapter is Medical and Fitness Standards and Programs. There's a couple of different initiatives that relate to this, and it's something that is very much on the forefront and in the news today. And I wanted to spend some time talking about it because it's kind of near and dear to me as well. Life Safety Initiative number 6 is to implement national medical and physical fitness standards. And then number 13, firefighters and their families must have access to counseling and psychological support. The two areas, of course, that are really, we hear, they're kind of the hot topics today are cancer and the presumptive bills that have been passed in several states. Whereas it's instead of having to prove that your cancer is work-related, you just have to, someone else has to prove that it's not. And so there's a lot of updating that we can do to this text as we talk about what we have learned about cancer and how exposure, just last week there was an article about just it being absorbed through your skin. And how today, clean turnout gear is the way. And everybody hates that. Everybody hates dirty helmets because it looks like you haven't done anything. But we are learning that it's all about health. It's about cancer. And so the book speaks to that a little bit. One of the biggest causes right now of firefighter death, if you look at the statistics, is cardiovascular disease, heart attack. Many times when we get firefighter line of duty deaths notices, it is due to some, a lot of times they say a cause unknown, or it collapsed on scene, collapsed after a call. And most of the time it is cardiovascular related. I have known in my own career several that have experienced that. So that is one area, and that's an area that we can actually do better. We can take care of ourselves, and I know that there's, some genetics does play part of it. Your history plays part of it as well, but we all know that we can get exercise, we can work out, we can, and I'm not talking about, lifting heavy weights, I'm just talking about walking, eating right, getting plenty of rest, lifestyle, stress, all those things affect our cardiovascular system. Regular checkups and regular physicals is a part of that as well. And that's one of the other things that is covered in the book. They talk here too about cancer. There's a little piece about cancer, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. And then, of course, injuries. We still have firefighters that die on scene, in the line of duty, fighting fire for various reasons. A couple of weeks ago, there was like 8 firefighter deaths. It was crazy. Some of them were from collapse. Maybe they were fighting a fire when doing a great offensive attack when maybe it should have been defensive. I don't second guess. I wasn't there. But we do know that it's still a very serious issue in the United States. So when we look at those statistics, we look at, we seem to be doing better about vehicle crashes, about, line of duty deaths related to that. There was one last week or week before in West Virginia. I want to say 2 firefighters were killed when the apparatus crashed, and I can't remember the cause of that crash. We do, wear your seatbelt. That's just kind of goes without saying. And there's all kinds of bells and whistles and things in our newer apparatus today that make that mandatory. If you don't have all those new bells and whistles, as the driver of the apparatus, you it's your responsibility to make sure that all your people are belted. And if you're driving the apparatus and there's nobody else there, well, by golly gee whiz, you need to wear your seatbelt. I'm sorry. It's just plain and simple as that. So a lot of these things, may seem like common sense in some ways, but we don't always abide by them. Wellness fitness initiatives, medical evaluations, routine things like that, setting up programs, fitness programs. There's a lot of talk about that. Again, it gets into expense when we're talking about these kinds of fitness programs. What do we do if somebody doesn't pass? If this is just a ploy, sometimes people say it's a ploy to get people off the job, and it's really not. We just don't want you to die on the job. There's a table on page 168 in your book, table 8.1, about some of the annual fitness evaluation procedures. One of the things that a lot of times we do is we might do an annual evaluation as far as, a CPAT or physical agility test that is different than a physical examination by a doctor. And even though I've met many people that could pass that physical agility test, they were probably not healthy. And if they'd caught a call the remainder of the day, they would have had to go home. They wouldn't have been able to go. So just because we're doing physical agility testing every year doesn't mean that we are meeting the mission of health and fitness. Because if we find people that are not able to pass, and we don't help them in some way, then we're really not doing ourselves a favor. Behavioral health. This is something, again, that we hear a lot about. The IAFC Wellness Fitness Initiative came out in 2008. It's about 10 years old. And this was included in that. We hear a lot today about firefighter suicide. And not just firefighters, but public safety. But certainly we're talking about firefighters here. It is not something that we talk about. It's not something that we want to discuss. Rough, tough firefighters don't have those issues, but they do. And I can't give the whole sermon right here. But watch your coworkers, watch yourself. There's only so much, we think about that traumatic call, and that's okay, that traumatic call. And then, but it's that day in and day out trauma that we see that creates the behavioral issues. And you can only deal with sadness for so long. And so when we're looking at this, you want to make sure that there is some kind of behavioral health component. And I've posted a couple of articles to the course site that I'm going to give you an assignment for. NFPA gives us a couple of standards. NFPA 1582 is the standard on comprehensive occupational medical program for fire departments. And then 1583 is the standard on health-related fitness programs for fire departments. So there's a couple of standards that help guide us as we work to meet the goal of these behavioral or these firefighter initiatives. Some of the things that we want to think about too when we're thinking about behavioral health is, of course, critical incident stress debriefing. And that's what I think that's the point I was trying to make a minute ago, is that a lot of times we have a really bad call, a traumatic call, a multi-fatality, fire, crash, vehicle crash, whatever. We do get a lot of times that critical incident stress debriefing. But again, like I said, it's that over and over and over part that, it just kind of heaps on top of us and we can't get out from under it. There's a variety of ways that this initiative can be implemented as far as behavioral. A lot of departments have chaplains, and they may not be there for a religious reason, but more so from a counseling standpoint. Other departments may have access to employee assistance programs where they can look at that. I think the biggest thing is that those in charge, chiefs, chief officers, company officers, recognize and make it mandatory for personnel. It's not an option. You're going to talk to somebody because we're not going to do it on our own. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to volunteer for that. I shouldn't say nobody. It's going to be an exception. It's going to be an exception. There's some on page 178, a trauma screening questionnaire that it can be used as well to help identify some of these needs and issues in our personnel. There's something on page 179 in your book is where it talks about some of the techniques for addressing this trauma-exposed firefighters. And again, this kind of goes back to a big event, but at some point, maybe that big event triggers all the little events to come together too. It is very sad when this happens. So they refer to a PTE as a potentially traumatic event. So is this, to me, many, it doesn't have to be a mass casualty for it to be potentially traumatic. Those involving, excuse me, children, those involving even senior adults are those potentially traumatic events. Another step is to take a timeout and a hot wash. And a lot of times that hot wash is what happens at the scene or right after the scene. You bring everybody together. The scene may not be the best place to do it, but you bring everybody together and you talk it out. What went right? What went wrong? Why this happened? What could we have done differently? Not better, worse. It's not our fault. But this helps identify some of the people that may need to take a timeout. And you may need to not come to work for a while. That may just be what happens. And then the traumatic stress questionnaire briefing, and then a complete assessment may need to be done. There's an algorithm on page 180 in your book that kind of shows the different ways that it can go. I heard a story from a firefighter. He's a volunteer. At the time, he had been full-time. He had a part-time business that grew into his full-time business, and then he was a part-time firefighter. And he was on his way to work, and he ran up on an accident, and it involved children. And this guy had, at the time, he had 3 of his own, 2 or 3. And if I remember right, one of the children died, and he went into work. He went ahead and he stopped up with the accident. He went on into work, and then he talked to his chief and said, "I can't work today, and I can't do this, and I need to go home." And I really, really commended him for doing that, for recognizing that, because there's so many of us that would not have, we would just push it behind us. And that's when these bad things happen. That's when marriages fail. That's when alcohol becomes a drug of choice. That's when drugs do become involved. And that's when suicides do occur. I truly believe that if we can take care of each other, and a lot of times this may mean pulling somebody to the side and saying, "Hey, you want to talk about it? If not to me, talk to somebody else, talk to the chaplain, do something. But you're not yourself, and you're withdrawn." As I have a friend who's going through a hard time, and she's a very private person. She said, "But I get tired of talking to myself." And I think that there's a lot of value in that. You have to talk to somebody. You have to find somebody. Be that somebody for another person, but also don't forget to take care of yourself. And as this thing brings up physically and mentally, don't let the traumas of the job eat away at you. I posted a couple of articles about firefighter behavioral health that I want you to read. I'm going to post a writing assignment to go along with those. Be sure and read the chapter. These are 2 very important initiatives. When we start talking about that culture of safety, we always think, that's teaching somebody to wear their gloves all the time. Well, no, it's not. It's things like this that we can really affect change in ourselves and in our team of people. And that's what we really need to be doing, is to affect that change and make sure that everybody is okay and that everybody does go home at the end of the shift. So look for that assignment. Thanks so much. And I will talk to y'all later. Thanks.